Hey everyone, minasama, konnichiwa, boku no channelへyokoso. Today I'd like to talk about one of my favorite movies. It's Manhattan from 1979 by Woody Allen. There are few filmmakers I'm more mixed about than Woody Allen. He's made films that I love, but even so, he has a particular writing style that sometimes drives me up the wall, and that almost every character in almost all of his movies has like the same personality and interests as himself. His movies can also feel terribly pretentious, with so many sort of highbrow references, and how it seems like every character is either a writer or an aspiring writer, so as to join the ranks of the intellectual New York scene. What's great about this movie is that while it has all these characteristics, it never bothers me here, in part because of how it manages to poke fun of them to an extent, but mostly because it's such a beautifully made film with interesting characters, while still being a funny Allen comedy. Before I continue, I'd like to address the elephant in the room, Alan himself. Personally, I tend to adhere to the philosophy of what's often referred to as, quote, separating the art from the artist. I believe that movies, especially narrative fiction ones, should and do take on a life of their own. After all, as consumers of art, the most important relationship we have is simply between you and your thoughts and a piece of art, not you and its maker. When it comes to Woody Allen himself, I confess that I remain pretty much ignorant about the details of the scandals and accusations about him, as I haven't yet researched them myself. But if what his harshest critics say against him are all true, which could very well be, then it's something that reflects poorly on him, not his movies. Anyway, out of all of his movies, Manhattan is the one that's understandably subject to the most backlash in relation to the man himself, as it portrays a sexual relationship between him and an underage girl, the concept of which the movie makes no real judgments about as being morally wrong. This and its real life parallels are almost impossible to ignore, but I promise that whenever I watch this movie, they don't really enter into my mind, nor will the personal problems, deficiencies, or even crimes of people involved in the making of movies enter into any of my thoughts on the movies themselves. However, with that being said, within the movie itself, these characters' relationship is still unbelievably troubling, especially with each consequent viewing. When I first saw this movie, maybe around a decade ago, I didn't think too much about it, but now I do. Hearing them talking about their sex and how he hopes the cops don't burst in at one point does make me uncomfortable about the situation. But even so, I think it pays to set this element aside for a second. One of the themes of this movie is about the characters not knowing exactly what they want and the confusion that relationships bring, and this relationship functions well dramatically to help serve that point. Woody Allen's character, Isaac, spends a lot of the time with her trying to break up with her, but eventually changes his mind after he does. And he's not the only one. His best friend, Yale, played by Michael Murphy, is married but has an affair with Mary, played by Diane Keaton, breaks up with her, and then changes his mind again. Likewise, Mary keeps bragging about how smart, pretty, and easy for her to get a guy she is, but she's just as confused as the other characters are. What makes this theme hit home for me, and one reason why I like this movie so much, is because it reveals these insecurities under the facade of their sophistication. These three main characters, Isaac, Mary, and Yale, are all established and happy on the surface. Isaac is a writer for a comedy show, Mary's an intellectual journalist with articles being written about her, and Yale is a married university professor with aspirations of becoming a writer, of course. And yet, all of them are in a very messy love triangle in which both of the men are cheating, and the woman can't make up her mind, and it all feels like a dead end. But it's not just the romance plot that exposes their flaws. There are really funny moments where their alleged sophistication is poked fun at. For example, Isaac suddenly quits his job in a hilarious scene over creative differences, but after being on his soapbox, he immediately regrets it, saying, I made a terrible mistake. For about 30 seconds, I was a big hero, and now it's directly to unemployment. I especially love Mary and Yale's pretentious discussion about overrated artists and Isaac's reaction to it. In particular, Mary's mention of Vincent van Gogh as Van Gogh, and how Isaac rips her about it later. For me, the funniest part about the scene is the end, where Isaac says to her, It was very nice meeting you, it was a pleasure and a sincere sensation. And then her statement about how she's from Philadelphia and they believe in God is priceless. There are also other people that the movie makes fun of for pretentious attitudes, especially this movie director at a party when he delivers his line about his latest movie about orgasms. But despite these laughs, The movie never treats the main cast as anything less than human beings. Diane Keaton's Mary is especially interesting and three dimensional. She always wears her intellectual traits on her sleeve, but Keaton lets us have glimpses of her true, insecure self, like in this scene where she and Yale break up. She gives my favorite performance in the movie, but everyone does a great job. Beside the three leads, Meryl Streep is also here as Isaac's ex wife, who just so happens to be a writer, of course. I wish she were given more to do, but she manages to have some impact in her scenes. But the real standout is Mariel Hemingway as the 17-year-old. She's clearly smitten with Isaac and wants a serious relationship with him, so it's interesting to see her gently push back against his constant attitude of not wanting to become serious. This seriousness, combined with a certain sensitivity that goes along with being a kid, earned her an Oscar nomination that year. But of course, the thing that continues to make this movie stand out among all Allen's work is the cinematography. This was made at a time when most movies were in color, but directors like Scorsese, Coppola, and Fassbinder went against the grain and made a black and white movie, and Manhattan is a great example of why they wanted to. Besides the main story of the movie, this kind of serves as a tribute to New York, especially in the famous opening montage. Set to Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, we get to see a variety of New York scenes and places, ending with a fireworks show. In terms of this tribute, the rest of the movie never really lives up to the opening, but Gordon Willis's widescreen photography is always excellent. The most visually dazzling scene is the planetarium, where we have a typical Woody Allen walking and talking scene, but in space, and it looks amazing. My favorite is this shot, where we see just their silhouettes with stars in the background. And speaking of shadows, look at this shot, which might be the artiest of Allen's career, playing with pockets of light in a really nice way. Now it's time for my favorite moments, starting with the moment that always makes me laugh every time. It's the scene in the art gallery where we're introduced to Diane Keaton's character. Alan talks about the pieces that he liked, with Diane Keaton disagreeing with everything in a condescending manner, including a hilarious look of disbelief and disappointment. Then he mentions how he didn't like the steel cube, which prompts her to praise it, saying, "The rest of the stuff down there was bullshit." And the way she says that line always gets to me, like it's perfect. The next moment is when Isaac breaks up with Tracy, Hemingway's character. The scene works as drama, with him trying to break the news to her in a gentle way, and it's one of the most effective scenes in the movie in this regard. I also think it's funny when he says the names of people her age that she should be dating, like Billy, Biff, Scooter, and Little Tommy. You know, those contemporary names that all young people have nowadays. Finally, there's the best line in the movie, which, if you've seen this movie, you probably already know what I'm talking about. Isaac and Yale are arguing in a classroom. Yale says, "You think you're God," to which Isaac replies, "Well, I gotta model myself after someone." It's made somehow even more funny because he's standing next to this, like, Neanderthal skeleton. But in the end, what I love about Manhattan is that it strikes a great balance between Allen's straight up comedies that made him famous early in his career to his, quote, more serious highbrow movies. In short, it's a movie where most things work. The drama and acting is engaging, it looks beautiful, and it's very funny at many points. It's one of my 1,000 favorite movies. Thanks for watching my video. Goshou makoto ni arigatou gozaimasu. Have you seen Manhattan? Let me know what you think in the comments. I think of all my favorite movies as my friends, and I think of my audience as friends too.